Very good morning. This is Jan-Robert Schutte from CryptoAcademy, and I have the pleasure to interview Gordon Einstein from downtown LA, and he has his own company, is CryptoLaw Partners, with offices in LA, New York, and Kiev. And tomorrow he's speaking exclusively in Amsterdam at the Day of the Crypto. Welcome, Gordon. What are you going to talk about tomorrow?
Well, thank you very much. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking about how to conduct a legally compliant ICO. So this is the issue sort of rocking the world right now, which is how do you engage in this sort of fundraising activity? How do you sell your tokens in a way that doesn't violate securities law in the United States and all over the world? So it's going to be all the ins and outs of SAFTs, registration exemptions, how to raise money internationally, the documentation you need, what to do, what not to do, whitelisting, accredited investors, and all that other good fun stuff.
Can you explain what a SAFT is?
Sure. So a SAFT stands for Simple Agreement for Future Tokens. It's based on a prior document called a SAFE, which stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity, which actually itself derived from a convertible note. There's a long history of companies and investors trying to come up with the perfect model for sending investment into a startup. What makes ICOs unique, of course, is that when people invest or when they buy, depending on which situation you're using, they're not getting equity in return and they're not getting debt in return. Usually what they're getting is these tokens. And there's a worldwide debate about whether or not these tokens are securities or not. But at least in the beginning, when you're building a platform and the tokens are not yet usable, there's a rough consensus in the world right now that those tokens should be treated as securities. So when you're raising money to build a platform, you don't want to issue tokens right away because then you have securities floating around the world, which can be a big problem. So instead of issuing securities, you use this document called a SAFT, where you take in investor money, you use that investor money to build the platform, and then and only then, once the platform is ready for use, do you convert the SAFTs over into tokens and then release them into the market. So this is a document that the name is getting around. Not everyone understands it. A lot of people misuse it. And it's a very good tool if you use it correctly. And it's, as we like to say, a big freaking disaster if you misuse it. So I'm here to bring some wisdom on this subject.
Okay, sounds very interesting. And
Thanks.
One last question about, can you explain the differences between, for instance, security token and utility token?
Sure. So the definition of a security varies by which country you're in. So not, we're living in a world filled with different countries and different laws, of course. The standard, I'd argue, that's most relevant at the moment is the United States standard, partly because China is not allowing ICOs, and China and the US are the two biggest economies. So in the United States, anything is a security if it meets the traditional definition like a stock or a bond, or if it's something called an investment contract. And so in the two primary pieces of law that are the basis of US securities law, which is the 1933 Act and the 1934 Act, we have this concept of an investment contract, sort of a bucket. And the determination of whether or not something is an investment contract is actually based on a US Supreme Court case from the last century. It was in 1946. Okay, the case is called Howey. And there's something called the Howey test. And the Howey test is 4 different prongs. And if you pass each one of those prongs, you are an investment contract, and therefore you're a security. If you're a security, and you're selling a security or offering a security for sale into the US, into the United States, you need to either register that security or offering with the SEC or find an exemption. So there's a nice little logical chain here. If you're offering something and it passes the Howey test, therefore it's an investment contract, and if you sell it or offer it for sale in the United States, you have to either register it or you have to find an exemption. It takes you down this nice little road. So when you're issuing these tokens, of course, when these laws were written, there's no idea of a token. No one knew what that was. What people are trying to figure out now is whether or not this or that token is an investment contract under the Howey test. If it is, register it. If not, you don't worry about it. Here's where SAFTs come into place. Suppose you're selling a token that is clearly not security. It will fail the Howey test once it's usable on the network. Like, for example, the SEC basically acknowledged that Ethereum and Bitcoin are not securities. The question is, if you take in money in order to build the platform that the tokens will be usable on later, in other words, you're taking money to build the platform, but the platform's not yet built, there's a rough consensus right now that those tokens now are securities, even if later on, once the platform is built, they won't be. Well, that's a disaster if you sell those tokens to the world and they're securities, and even if they're not going to be securities later. That's a selling of securities without registering it or finding an exemption. So the SAFT is the way around that. And it gets complicated, but it's really useful.
It's very interesting. And,
yeah.
I'm looking forward tomorrow at 9:30
Thank you.
a.m. You will be sharp at the stage.
Definitely 9:30 a.m. If it's 9:30 p.m., I'm going to miss my flight.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Gordon. And
thank you.
We will meet each other later also, later on in Holland. And maybe on one of our seminars as well.
That'd be great. I love it here. This is a great place.
Okay, thank you very much, Gordon.
Thank you.